Joel Hardy, welcome into the weeds, mate. Great to have you on.
Thanks, mate. Well, good to be here.
We'll see if it's good to be, mate. You are a cannabis cultivator. You're running a pretty big operation up here in northern New South Wales, Cymra Life Sciences, producing superbly green, an amazing Australian organic cannabis product. Let's say that's soil grown organic cannabis product for being, hundreds of thousands of Australians are availing themselves on it. How did you come to be a cannabis entrepreneur, cultivator, mate? Tell us about your journey.
Well, obviously, as a teenager and growing up, I had already sort of consumed a fair amount of cannabis, and it was a drug that agreed with me. But after that, I went to California, lived in San Francisco for a bit, and I kind of saw I got my medical prescription over there, and I saw it go from medical to legal over there. And the experience was, for me, such a wonderful thing to be able to smell and feel and taste and look at all the cannabis when you went on a Friday afternoon to go and grab your cannabis for the weekend. And that just changed my kind of perspective on cannabis in terms of how it could be bought and sold, and people could experience and they could smell it for themselves, and everyone got to pick what they wanted and all that sort of stuff. And that really changed. Like my knowledge of cannabis went through the roof, because I'm one of those guys. If I enjoy learning about something, I'm just going to keep reading. You know what I mean? That's what I do most of my reading. So I just thought about starting a cannabis business. That's all I could think about for 6 years when I was there, and tried to start a few little ones, mainly around CBD in America, and then heard that Australia was going to do a licensed process. And having come from California environment, I thought that was the place to be. It's been tough being a grower, to be honest, because of just the capital infrastructure and the regulatory hurdles, but we are where we are, and it's...
so now you've come to Australia, you're set up in Alstonville, you've set up the sort of Byron, for people who don't know, Byron Bay hinterland. You get a site, you're building big greenhouses, a lot of capital investment.
That's right.
And a lot of regulation. Like, I've been to your facility, it's like Fort Knox. It's got like gigantic cyclone fences, razor wire. It's essentially a prison, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a Schedule 8 facility, so in theory we could hold opiates. We could grow opiates in there, I mean, if we got a license to do so, but it's got that security level. So it's probably, I think it's probably a bit overregulated, to be honest, compared to what's coming in from other countries and what level of regulation, how many fences they're putting up. And most of the countries that are importing are now legal. So it seems a bit silly that we're putting up double fences, but allowing it coming from someone where there is no fences.
So how long did it take you to go from, look, let's do this thing, raising some capital, to, producing your first product?
Yeah, so it's been about 6 to 7 years. To just getting the site, raising money, getting capital to build it all out, and then there's a lot of delays with construction and licensing and all that sort of stuff. It's, probably not the most regulated industry in the world. I'd like to see another one, So it's just a lot dealing with local government, state government, federal government, and then just construction. Took a long time, and
there's a lot of process, like ongoing regular. It's not like set and forget.
No.
Like New South Wales' health is you're going to do all this reporting back about all the movements of the cannabis, how much cannabis, where it is, all the rest.
Yeah, well,
there's a massive reporting burden, isn't there?
The government knows every single seed, every single cutting, every single plant we have within that facility, and then we report to the Office of Drug Control, TGA, New South Wales Health, and New South Wales DPI on a quarterly basis. And then they can expect, any one of those companies, regulatory bodies can inspect us at any time, and pretty much regularly do. So it's, super heavily regulated, I think.
And we've got product coming in from Canada, Thailand, South Africa, different jurisdictions that just don't have the same regulatory burden, cost burden, and or quality assurance as well, because your product has to be, really like standardised and quality assured, doesn't it?
That's right. I mean, I think in Australia we have just a regulated system, right? Everything, food, produce, anything we consume is kind of well regulated to a certain extent. So we have a great reputation on the world scale for producing really clean and good products, and I think most Australians appreciate that. But then in other countries where it's recreational, there's not really any rules around what's getting on those plants, where they're coming from, who owns them, all that sort of stuff. And, I've got the opposite of that. So it is frustrating. And then on top of that, I think what's most frustrating is that I can't even export into those countries. So I can't export to Canada and I can't export to Thailand.
That's the crazy thing.
I know.
They won't allow us to export. We're being flooded. We're essentially having crap dumped on us. Let's be honest about it. And we can't export to those countries. It's really a job for the federal government to sort of say, hey, it's got to be at least a two-way street. Or, we're going to protect our own industry. What would you like to see governments do to support Australian cannabis cultivators and producers?
I mean, I think there's a few things, but the number one thing is it doesn't seem like it's trade if only one side is trading. So I don't really understand any industry that would allow that. It just so happens that we're stuck in this sort of regulatory hurdle where they've allowed imports to come in, but they haven't allowed us to export to those countries. So hopefully the government will get its act together because, they are standing on a platform of Australian businesses and Australian made and all this sort of stuff with tariffs flying around. And look, I would be happy if everyone opened up their borders and we could all export. That would be a fun game, and let's go, right? Because I think people would smoke Australian cannabis in Thailand, and
Good.
also
Because we produce high quality goods here. Australian cannabis is some of the best in the world, isn't it?
We have a country that can grow cannabis year round. Because all the way from Tassie in the summer to North Queensland in the winter.
Yeah.
And then you go WA, you've got massive growing areas up there as well. So we could.
And I was just talking to one of the growers here in Nimbin. He grows in winter.
That's right.
Winter grower, yeah.
We actually grow our outdoor crop about 2.5 to 3 months later than the Tassie guys. It's pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
And then the North Queensland
you're
guys
starting in January or something?
Yeah, we're starting in Jan, and they're planting in October.
Yeah.
Crazy, isn't it?
It is amazing.
But it just shows you the size of Australia, right?
Yeah.
And also the growing regions. You've got the Mildura area, that's great in summer too. You've got the Victorian area, great in summer, and so is Tassie, great in summer. Just pure sunshine all the time, no rain, very dry, consistent temperature. So they can do outdoor grows really, really well. So I think the bulk of outdoor will probably come from down there. But if you think about the size of what they could do, growing cannabis, and there is a couple of big operators in Tassie, feel the world. We could feed the world cannabis, right? Fairly cheap as well because it's outdoor grown. And that's what frustrates me is if the government actually kind of got their stuff together, this industry, as we talked about before, Jeremy, could be huge, right? We could be like 5,000 jobs in regional areas. We're exporting to the world, having a huge domestic industry as well. And I think
5,000 is like minimum. I think it's an industry that could employ 50,000 people.
That's right. Because, the amount of people that have to go into a farm is a lot more than most industries, right? And
there's a lot of processing, isn't there?
Yes.
It's hand process. Has anyone really unpicked that? Is anyone able to, when they've got their final product, they've got their cannabis, is there a machine that's producing high quality, that defoliates, get trim, the trim?
Yeah.
Are there machines that do that? That's pretty labour intensive, isn't it?
Yeah, there is machines. We don't do machines. The challenge with the machine is it doesn't really cut nicely. It's just going to hack stuff away. So, from a perspective of how it looks and how the buds are looking, it doesn't do the best of favours. But I suppose if it's cheap, it doesn't really matter sometimes. And then the other thing is that in reality, you do lose a bit of yield because the trim machine chops up more. So we don't use a machine, but that means it's labour intensive.
Yeah.
So, and I think you'll find that most Australian cultivators are doing some form of hand trimming for some of their buds. And so that's going to be labour intensive as well. But just the agricultural people, the scientific people, the sales people, the business development people, the
you got your
logistics
front of
people,
house people, logistics,
admin. Don't forget all the ancillary services. Don't forget all the bugs, all the greenhouse maintenance, all
the electrician,
equipment, electrician, every.
Your facility, big issue on the North Coast is humidity. It's hot up here in summer.
Yeah.
You've got an indoor facility. You've got to cool it down. You've got to,
That's right.
You've got fans running. You've got electricity going. You've got to put solar in.
We've got dehumidifiers as well.
Dehumidifiers, all the rest. And you grow in soil.
That's right.
You're soil grown. You do, companion planting, all the rest of it. Why did you go down that path? Why aren't you growing in, bags or hydroponic,
Yeah, sometimes I regret the decision, I suppose. But I think the reality is that I really went into this in California even though I'd been smoking. But I think for me, my journey was mainly focused around, I think, organic, because when I was in Sydney, you could buy it from bikies and it would cover some pesticides, and I'd still smoke that stuff. But I wondered why I didn't really enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
And then I would come to Nimbin or Byron when I was 18, and mate, it was a different experience.
Yeah.
And then California If you go to San Francisco, it's just near the Humboldt Mountains. So during summer, they're bringing in fresh buds, and they're all organic, right? So they had where I was shopping, or where my dispensary was, where I liked the guy who was serving me. There was a massive organic section and a smaller hydroponic section. I think I just fell in love with organic weed.
It's just better quality. I had a biodynamic French wine the other day. A mate bought a bottle and it was expensive. There's no doubt about it. It was ridiculously expensive. And it was like, a 20-year-old bottle of wine. But it was French, like from Bordeaux, biodynamic. That wine, like got me really high. It was like I got really high off like 2 glasses of red wine. And I was going, why is it like that? And I reckon it's just because there's got all the terpenes, the esters. There's more body to it. And cannabis, like with something that's a psychoactive substance, that it's that's going to be real in that product as well, isn't it?
And I think sun-grown cannabis usually has more diversity of terpenes, because if you think about what's going into a hydroponic product, it's a set of chemicals essentially, and they've got them on a program, like a feed program. Whereas with organics, they're getting everything. They're getting whatever they want, and they're sucking it up from the soil, and we're providing the things we know it needs, but it's also sucking up whatever it needs, and then it uses all those organic nutrients to then fight off whatever it needs in sort of a healthy environment.
How do you deal with mold? If you've got mold, do you use organic amendments, that sort of thing? Or
we use organic sprays.
And you sprays, but you do a lot of plant husbandry, a lot of cleaning out of your plants.
That's right.
Getting rid of all those leaves, making sure you get air circulation, the rest.
That's right. We have a lot of people running around making sure that there's air circulation and that everything's been pruned properly. So if you come to our site, it's very, very organised and everything looks the same, and it's well-run facility. So you kind of have to do that. But also, as you said before, with mold, we've got dehumidifiers. We do the organic sprays, and we sort of monitor for.
And what about genetics? What have you picked plants that are like less likely to be?
That's right.
So what are you going with in terms of genetics?
We've got a bunch of genetics. We've got about sort of 12 running through the greenhouse now.
Are you doing your own plant breeding?
Yeah, we do our own plant breeding. Probably one of the only people in the country. I think it's a shame that is the case, because I think if we sort of took the industry back as a domestic industry, we would have a whole breeding, industry. Australia would be producing.
That IP is going to be worth
That's right.
billions.
But all the breeding houses in America and Canada and that sort of stuff that are pretty cool. They've got amazing seeds. Like, we could have that here. We can catch up. You know what I mean? And also, Australian crops will go better in Australian places, so they'll breed for specific areas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then what happens to us is we like to grow stuff. Some strains in winter and in summer, or some in spring. Just depending on whether they're mold resistance or not mold resistance. Things like that. So. It's pretty interesting science, and we do breed a lot of our strains. And we've got a bunch of new strains coming through now, which is exciting, probably one of the most exciting things. But how we do that is we do a pheno hunt where a breeding program where we have a male and 4 females, and we create about 160 seed, and then we pheno hunt them, which means we throw them all on the ground, see which one works best, measure it all up with an agronomist who takes all the data in terms of yield, cannabinoids, like how it grows, if it's mold resistant, pest resistant, all that sort of stuff. And then from there, we then also look at the THC, terpenes, all that sort of stuff, and then select it. So usually only about 1 to 2 in 140 make it through the breeding program.
Amazing.
And we're doing that every quarter. And then, we obviously crossbreed with certain things and bring things in from overseas sometimes as well. So
are you doing any pheno hunting out in the valleys of Nimbin? Because I was talking to Gary.
Not allowed to do that, Jeremy.
Aren't you?
No.
That's ridiculous.
No, the New Zealanders were allowed to do it, which I thought
there was an amnesty, wasn't
right.
there?
They said great.
Why do we have an amnesty?
I had to import them from a country that was already legal, which is annoying. Because if you think about it, why would I want to grow anything else but Australian genetics? Because they've already been grown here and they already work here.
They've been going here for 50 years.
They sort of forced us backwards. Another sort of challenge with regulatory environments is like they've forced us backwards to make it harder for us to catch up to the world. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Well, speaking of catching up the world, we are like, we've been a slow starter, but we've had medicinal cannabis now coming up for 10 years. Where do you see the future of the cannabis industry in Australia? Do you think we'll move to adult recreational use? Like, where do you see it going? And what are the opportunities?
I think I'd like to see it less regulated over time. Like I think the medical model could still exist if it was maybe you had to go to your doctor once every 6 months and just got a script for cannabis or cannabis flower, and then you just went to the pharmacy and bought whatever you wanted.
Yep.
Rather than having to go back for scripts all the time. So that, hopefully that goes down there. I'm hoping the drug driving stuff will get through.
What about getting on the PBS or something like that? Because I've been talking to a lot of people about that. You don't think that's going to happen?
No, not the way the TGA works, mate. Like those computer says no people, right? They're not going to do something unless it's following the rules. So what's challenging is they make it really expensive and really hard to go and get that clinical data. Versus allowing the medical market to kind of thrive and
so you got a small, like let's call it a cottage industry like the Australian cannabis. You can't go through that process, and you're up against big pharma who can spend billions on their clinical trials, all the rest, and green light the next opiate.
And they still want all the clinical data that we already know is true, like safety data and like dose data, and like there's a few things and other things, but and they want large evidence. It's got to be like probably 400 people study, which is probably going to cost like $10 million, $15 million. And then there's a risk it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or something went wrong with the data. Not so much it doesn't work, or depending on what condition, I suppose. But there's already been a few companies failed doing CBD. There's a couple that we've done a clinical trial in chronic pain, and that had really good results, but we can't afford to pay for the big one, which we'd love to do, but it's just too hard.
Well, it is too hard, but there's been a lot of challenges that you've overcome on the way, mate. Is it a success? Are you going to continue on with it?
I hope so. I think one thing we mentioned earlier is that, there's a lot of imports coming in. And so there's 5 countries importing to this country that don't allow exports to their country. And so it's hard to compete with 5 countries and the prices that they're bringing it in for. And sort of the lack of regulatory oversight in those countries, it's just hard to compete.
Well, it is hard to compete, and it's an abysmal situation. We've got to get behind our domestic growers and our domestic producers and the value that they bring to their economy, and the fantastic products they produce. But look, Joel, I really appreciate the work you've done as a cannabis pioneer, entrepreneur. I'm sure you're going to go to bigger and better things because you produce a fantastic product and people love it. More strength to your arm, mate. Anything I can do to help. The Legalised Cannabis Party want to see a thriving cannabis sector, domestically produced. So more strength to your arm, mate.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. Have a good day.